Iran has just laid out, in unusually explicit detail, how it believes it could fight, and survive, a war with the US. In a long report, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Tehran outlines a multi-stage conflict plan: US airstrikes, Iranian retaliation, regional proxy warfare, cyber attacks, and, most importantly, an attempt to paralyze the global oil trade. According to Iran's own framing, this strategy wouldn't defeat the US militarily. Instead, it would make war so economically and politically costly that Washington would be forced to stop. With US-Iran talks now hanging by a thread and rhetoric escalating, this isn't just theoretical. So today we're going to break down Iran's vision of war, stage by stage, and then critically assess what's realistic, what's exaggerated, and what could spiral out of control. Stage 1. Iran's scenario begins with what it sees as the most likely trigger: US air and missile strikes on Iranian nuclear and military targets. These would likely involve aircraft carriers in the region, long-range bombers flying from the US or Europe, possibly land-based systems in allied countries. This is not speculative. The Pentagon has planned for this contingency for decades and has already struck Iranian facilities before. From Iran's perspective, the goal isn't to stop these attacks. It knows that's unrealistic. Instead, Iran believes it has hardened, dispersed, and buried enough of its critical assets to survive the initial blow. Underground missile cities, redundant command structures, and mobile launch platforms are all designed to ensure one thing: Iran can still hit back. The US would overwhelmingly dominate the opening phase. Stealth aircraft, precision weapons, cyber-electronic warfare, and missile defense suppression would severely degrade Iranian capabilities. However, Iran is correct about one thing. You cannot eliminate all of its retaliatory capacity in a single strike. This is about survivability, not victory. Stage 2. The regional retaliation and proxy war. Iran's response plan expands the war immediately beyond its borders. Within hours, Tehran envisions ballistic missile and drone strikes on US bases in Qatar, Kuwait, the UAE, Iraq, and Syria. Saturation attacks designed to overwhelm Patriot missile defenses. Simultaneous activation of allied militias across the region. Iran's missile arsenal is large and diverse. Drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic systems designed to evade interception through sheer volume. At the same time, Iran's so-called axis of resistance would be activated, Hezbollah threatening Israel from the north. Houthis escalating attacks in the Red Sea. Iraqi militias targeting US personnel and facilities. The logic is simple: stretch US forces across too many fronts to focus on Iran itself. This is where Iran's assumptions become more fragile. Hezbollah, Hamas, and other proxies are weaker today than Iran's own planning documents suggest, after sustained Israeli operations. Coordination across multiple fronts, while simultaneously defending against US and Israeli retaliation, would be extremely difficult. Host governments, especially Iraq and Lebanon, may actively try to prevent their territory from being used, fearing catastrophic retaliation. Still, Iran's strategy doesn't require perfect coordination. Even limited proxy activity raises US force protection costs and political risk. Stage 3. Cyber warfare. Iran also places heavy emphasis on cyber attacks. Targets would include energy infrastructure, transportation networks, financial systems, military communications. The goal isn't total shutdown. It's disruption, uncertainty, and political pressure on host governments supporting the US. Iran has demonstrated cyber capabilities before, including the Shamoon attack on Saudi Aramco. Iran's cyber capabilities are real but asymmetric. They can cause disruption, especially to civilian and commercial systems, but US Cyber Command is vastly more capable. In fact, Iran is far more vulnerable to cyber retaliation than the US. Cyber would be a supplementary tool, not a war-deciding one. Stage 4. The Strait of Hormuz, Iran's economic weapon. This is the most critical part of Iran's strategy. Around 21 million barrels of oil per day pass through the Strait of Hormuz, roughly 1/5 of global oil supply. Iran believes it could mine the strait, attack tankers with missiles and drones, use swarming naval tactics, potentially sink vessels to block shipping lanes. Even partial disruption could send oil prices sharply higher. Iran openly talks about $150 200 oil. The assumption is that global economic pain would fracture international support for US action and force Washington to negotiate. This is Iran's strongest card, and also its most dangerous. The US can eventually keep Hormuz open through minesweeping, convoy escorts, strikes on Iranian coastal assets, but eventually matters. Even short-term disruption would shock oil markets, spike LNG and shipping rates, hammer emerging economies, trigger global risk-off conditions. At the same time, Iran would devastate its own economy, which relies heavily on oil exports. This is mutual economic destruction, not leverage without cost. Stage 5. The endgame. Endurance, not victory. Iran's strategy ultimately rests on one belief. The United States does not want another long war in the Middle East. Tehran doesn't think it can win militarily. It believes it can outlast politically by imposing sustained regional instability, rising US casualties, global economic pain, energy market chaos. Iran hopes Washington will choose de-escalation over escalation. This is the most uncertain part of the plan. Iran's strategy assumes controlled escalation, rational decision-making, US restraint even after casualties. History suggests those assumptions are dangerous. A single mass casualty event, a sunk tanker, or a direct hit on US personnel could trigger overwhelming retaliation, not negotiation. Escalation dynamics rarely follow the script. Iran's war plan is coherent, asymmetric, and dangerous, but also deeply risky for Tehran itself. It relies less on military victory and more on economic disruption, political pressure, energy market leverage, US war fatigue. The most credible threat isn't battlefield defeat, it's global spillover. Oil prices, LNG flows, shipping routes, and financial markets. And that key was precisely why both sides may still prefer talks in Oman to bombs in the Gulf. Iran's strategy is designed to be terrifying, but also to ensure it never has to be used.